Do you think you understand women? Well, know this: a man's greatest weakness is thinking that their game is based on feelings. Machiavelli warned that politics should be guided by reality, not ideals. And the reality is that when it comes to power, emotions become strategy. The end justifies the means, and these invisible weapons are not seen in romance novels, but in real-life theater. They don't need loyal armies of their own, because they've learned to manipulate the only army that matters: their emotions. Better to be feared than loved. For them, it's better that you never realize when you're being led. A docile look can be just the appearance of virtue. Silence can be a trap. Distance, a way to heighten desire. Everything is precisely calculated without ever seeming like it. You'll discover today that nothing is accidental. Intermittent validation, ambiguity, scarcity, every detail has a hidden purpose. And if you don't learn to see beyond words, you'll continue to be manipulated by strategies as old as the courts of Florence. Want to understand how to defend yourself? Stay with me, because what Machiavelli revealed in politics, you'll now recognize in relationships. Intermittent validation. He knew that constant validation weakens because it creates predictability. Humans, when constantly receiving approval, begin to take it for granted, losing their luster and desire. Machiavelli understood that power is not built through constant concessions, but through the calculated administration of rewards. It is in this space of emotional scarcity that the mind becomes trapped, asking, when will the next gesture of approval come? Just like a ruler who selectively distributes favors, the individual who masters intermittent validation becomes a center of gravity because people orbit in search of recognition. This strategy reflects a politics guided by reality, not ideals. Because true human nature responds more to uncertainty than to absolute guarantee. The mind desires what it fears losing. This is where the old maxim comes in: the end justifies the means. Granting a little, then taking it away, then returning it another time. That's how lasting power is created. Imagine someone in a relationship, whether romantic or professional, who receives constant praise. Soon, these compliments lose their impact, but when validation appears at unexpected moments, interspersed with periods of silence or neutrality, each word gains weight. It's like the calculated use of force in politics. If everything is applied intensely, the effect is lost. But when it appears sporadically, the impact is devastating. Companies do this with flash promotions. Celebrities do it when they disappear from social media and return with an explosive announcement. Intermittency creates magnetism, and here it's worth remembering Machiavelli: better to be feared than loved. In the game of validation, the fear of losing approval is the engine that keeps the flame burning. Those who want to dominate this field need constant adaptability, as each person responds differently to the same dose of recognition. A practical example: think of a leader who wants to keep his team motivated. If he praises everyone equally every day, this gesture becomes routine. But if he alternates silence with specific personalized words of encouragement, highlighting a specific effort, a bold idea, or a loyal gesture, validation becomes golden. The same happens in personal relationships. When someone feels they can't fully predict another's reaction, they dedicate more energy to winning that look, that smile, that word. This is the true use of virtù and fortuna, the balance between calculation and opportunity. Intermittent validation isn't the absence of recognition, but its precise dosage administered like a rare medicine. And it is precisely in this game of uncertainty that space opens up for something even more sophisticated: deliberate ambiguity, the next step on the path to influence. Deliberate ambiguity. Absolute clarity may be comfortable, but it never generates power. When everything is out in the open, people become complacent, calculating, and no longer dependent on your presence. Machiavelli, who always advocated decisions based on true human nature, knew that ambiguity is a subtle weapon. It creates expectation, doubt, and multiple interpretations. A prince who reveals all his plans loses the mystery. One who leaves open spaces forces others to fill in the gaps with their own fears and desires. Deliberate ambiguity is exactly that. Not lying, but never giving away all the cards. It is a calculated use of the power of words, where each silence carries more weight than a direct statement. After all, in politics guided by reality, not ideals, perception is worth more than truth itself. The end justifies the means when uncertainty keeps everyone on their toes. An everyday example, when someone says, "Let's see," the phrase can mean either yes or no. This slight ambiguity prolongs interest and keeps the other party guessing. Charismatic leaders use this when announcing projects. Instead of revealing everything, they drop fragments of information, letting others' imaginations run wild. The same occurs in relationships. When one person doesn't immediately define what they feel or think, it opens space for the other to question themselves and work even harder to decipher the signals. This game is similar to the appearance of virtue. It seems natural, but in fact it's strategically rehearsed. By not committing fully, you avoid being hated for broken promises and keep everyone in the tension of the possible. It's in this gray area that curiosity grows and control is strengthened. Deliberate ambiguity can also be used in negotiations. Imagine a businessman facing an investor. If he reveals his entire plan, he loses leverage. But if he talks about strategic opportunities that I can't detail yet, he generates interest and keeps the game open. This skill requires virtù and fortuna, knowing when to say little, when to suggest a lot, and when to let the other person get lost in their own interpretations. It's not vulgar manipulation, but a dance of meanings that captures attention. Those who master this resource become unpredictable, and unpredictability is power. After all, if one can't predict their next steps, the other person will never have complete security. And it is precisely this insecurity that paves the way for the next secret weapon: scarcity and calculated distance. Scarcity and calculated distance, everything that is abundant loses value. This is the rule of life, politics, markets, and human relations. Machiavelli, observing the behavior of courts, realized that the constant presence of a ruler made him banal. When he withdrew, his absence created rumors, longing, and fear. This is the logic of scarcity and calculated distance, appearing sparingly but strategically, so that each gesture weighs like gold. The end justifies the means when it is understood that desire arises from lack. Politicians use this when they limit public appearances so that each speech is awaited as an event. Artists do the same, disappearing for years before releasing a work. Even in everyday life, a message responded to later can carry more power than 100 immediate responses. Politics guided by reality shows that the human mind values what seems rare more than what is available at all times. A simple example: think of perfumes. It's no coincidence that limited editions sell faster, even if they're no better than regular ones. Scarcity creates an emotional impulse, a fear of missing out, which leads to immediate action. The same occurs with people who are always busy. Their time becomes seen as precious, and winning it becomes a victory. At this point, the calculated use of force comes into play. It's not about ignoring or disappearing completely, but about creating a cadence of presence that keeps the other person constantly searching. Those who appear predictably become landscapes. Those who appear in a controlled manner become myths. The best ruler, said Machiavelli, is not the one who is always visible, but the one who knows how to be remembered even when they're not in sight. Virtue here appears as the discipline of withdrawing at the right moment so that the return is even more powerful. In the personal sphere, this applies to social and even professional relationships. The employee who always says yes loses power. The one who chooses when and how to engage becomes indispensable. The friend who is always available is no longer valued. The one who knows how to be absent creates space to be sought after. Calculated distance isn't indifference, it's strategy. It's avoiding being hated for excessive presence, but also not being forgotten for total absence. It's the balance between being desired and being feared. This game of scarcity builds value because absence creates a narrative. Where is he? When will he show up? What will come this time? And it's in this void that the imaginary flourishes. But scarcity to work requires an extra skill, reinterpreting facts. Because there's no point in controlling the time of your presence if you don't know how to shape how that presence is perceived. Reinterpret facts. Machiavelli said that power lies not only in what happens, but in how it is told. Reality is shaped by narrative, and those who master the art of reinterpreting facts dominate consciences. Politics guided by reality, not ideals, teaches that people follow not the truth itself, but the version of truth that most convinces them. This is why leaders since antiquity have always recounted defeats as rehearsals for victory, failures as learning experiences, and mistakes as necessary sacrifices. The end justifies the means when the right narrative transforms a stumble into a stepping stone. Consider an example. A company that fails to deliver a product can say, "We can't meet your expectations right now," or it can state, "We're improving to provide the best possible experience." And the facts are the same, but the perception is completely different. And perception in practice is worth more than the bare facts. This technique also applies to personal situations. Imagine someone who was rejected in a job interview. They might tell themselves and others that I wasn't good enough, or they might reinterpret the episode as this position wasn't compatible with my value, and the experience made me better prepared for the next one. See, the difference between feeling defeated and feeling like you're growing lies in how you tell your own story. Spiritual leaders, coaches, and even historical figures like Churchill mastered this technique. They turned losses into fuel rather than scars. It's the calculated use of the power of words that alters collective perception. When one assumes the appearance of virtue before the public, even if behind the scenes are imperfect, the illusion of control is created. And in power politics, avoiding hatred involves constantly reinterpreting how facts reach the public. Practical examples are everywhere. On social media, influencers transform criticism into content. A hateful comment becomes the subject of a video. A public failure becomes proof of authenticity. In business, entrepreneurs reinterpret crises as opportunities for reinvention, and the market, which values constant adaptability, responds positively. Even in personal relationships, the person who knows how to reinterpret an offense as a sign of weakness rather than a personal attack maintains their emotional stability. This is virtù and fortuna in action. Virtù to shape the narrative, fortuna to seize the moment. Those who know how to reinterpret are not hostage to circumstances, but masters of them. And it is precisely this skill that paves the way for the next secret weapon, social triangulation, where it matters not only how you tell your story, but also to whom you make it resonate. Social triangulation. Machiavelli knew that power is rarely exercised directly. It is often sustained through intermediaries, comparisons, and social echoes. Social triangulation is the art of never standing alone in a situation, but always creating the illusion of a third party, validating, comparing, or reinforcing your position. In a politics guided by reality, not ideals, This translates into using allies, external opinions, and strategic examples as mirrors that amplify your authority. It's like a ruler who doesn't directly reprimand a subject, but compares them to another who acted better. Thus, the correction doesn't sound like an attack, but a lesson. The end justifies the means when, instead of direct confrontation, a network of influence is created where your voice echoes in different mouths. The result? You appear greater than you really are, as your strength is multiplied by the social reflection. In real life, this appears when someone reinforces their opinion by citing an authority. Even such and such an expert has already spoken about this. It's not just your voice speaking, but the triangulation of a respected name that creates weight. In personal relationships, it's also common. Instead of asking for something directly, the person comments that others have already noticed the same thing. This takes the weight off the confrontation and creates the impression of consensus. Business leaders use this technique when announcing changes. Instead of saying, "I decided," they prefer, "The market demands it," or "Our team raised this need." It's the calculated use of the power of external voices to legitimize your position. This way, you avoid being hated for appearing authoritarian while maintaining real control over the situation. Virtue lies in choosing the right allies. Fortune lies in having the right moment to use them as a mirror. A powerful example. In negotiations, salespeople use triangulation by showing testimonials from satisfied customers. They're not just offering a product, but creating a circle of validation that puts pressure on the buyer. The same goes for those who want to strengthen their image. They don't praise themselves directly, but are seen with influential people, photographed at events, or mentioned in news reports. Triangulation is, at its core, a strategy for manipulating social perceptions without having to act directly. Those who master this seem to be constantly surrounded by recognition, even if they've orchestrated it all behind the scenes. It's the appearance of virtue elevated to its most subtle form. But remember, this game requires limit tests to work, because any network of influence is only solid when you understand how far you can stretch the rope without it breaking. Limit tests, Machiavelli always warned, those who govern without testing their subjects lose sight of the true loyalty that surrounds them. Power is measured not by rhetoric, but by the reactions that emerge when you push the boundaries of what is acceptable. Limit tests are exactly that. Small reality checks to observe how much the other will tolerate, how much they will endure, how much they will obey. Politics guided by reality, not ideals, teaches that true human nature is revealed in extremes, never in balance. It's easy for someone to appear loyal when everything is going well. The truth emerges when you force the situation. The end justifies the means, for even momentary discomfort can yield valuable information about who is truly on your side. The calculated use of force here is not brutality, but experimentation, changing deadlines, denying favors, increasing demands. What remains after the test is the reliable foundation of your power. A simple example. Imagine a boss who always accepts delays from his team. Over time, everyone understands that he has no authority. But if, at a certain point, he decides to enforce a strict rule and observes who adapts and who resists, he discovers who is committed and who was simply taking advantage. This is virtue in action, the courage to provoke discomfort, to measure loyalty. Fortune lies in choosing the right moment, because testing too soon can shatter still fragile alliances, while testing too late can erode trust. It also works in personal relationships. Who hasn't tested a friend's patience with a prolonged absence? If the bond is genuine, it remains. If it's superficial, it disappears. Better to be feared than loved, Machiavelli reminded us, because the fear of the test is what maintains order. Blind love by itself doesn't build solid walls. In the social game, limit tests also appear in subtle situations. Think of someone asking for something unlikely just to observe the reaction. It's not the request itself that matters, but the response. Politicians do this all the time. They launch controversial proposals, knowing that some of them will be rejected, but also revealing who their fiercest opponents are and who caves under pressure. This constant adaptability gives the ruler a true map of the playing field. On social media, creators do this when they publish strong opinions to observe who supports, who criticizes, and who remains silent. The test becomes a thermometer of engagement. And if each limit reveals strengths and weaknesses, then an even more sophisticated strategy emerges, assuming the role of strategic victim not out of weakness, but to force the other to show their true colors. Strategic victim Machiavelli understood that power isn't always displayed through brute force. It often flourishes when someone deliberately assumes a vulnerable position. Being a strategic victim isn't true submission, but a disguise that disarms the enemy and wins allies. In politics guided by reality, not ideals, it's known that people tend to support those who appear to be wronged. This appearance of virtue attracts sympathy, and sympathy turns into loyalty. The end justifies the means when, by appearing dejected, you force others to fight in your defense. It's a psychological game. Those who appear strong all the time attract resistance. Those who know how to alternate controlled fragility create an invisible army of protectors. Better to be feared than loved, but sometimes being protected can be even more effective in accumulating power. Examples are everywhere. Think of political leaders who, when criticized, present themselves as victims of persecution. The narrative generates popular support, even when the facts tell a different story. Business people do the same by dramatizing a failure to justify radical adjustments, transforming criticism into empathy. Even in personal settings, the strategic victim appears when someone pretends to have been offended, only to force the other to explain or apologize. It's the calculated use of force in reverse. Instead of attacking, you retreat. And by retreating, you create a vacuum that forces others to step up to your defense. This constant adaptability is key. You don't have to be the true martyr, just the mirror that reflects injustice. Virtue lies in controlling the narrative. Fortune lies in knowing when to assume the role without falling into the caricature of self-pity. In digital media, this resource is used masterfully. Influencers, when attacked, often position themselves as victims of unnecessary hate, garnering even more engagement. The audience, driven by outrage, becomes the loyal army that attacks in their place, their own loyal armies that arise at no additional cost. This shows that being a strategic victim isn't about passivity, but about manipulating perception. After all, when you choose to expose yourself at the right moment, apparent pain becomes both a shield and a sword. However, strategic victimhood alone isn't enough. You need to accelerate the game, create tension, and leave no room for prolonged reflection. This is where the next secret weapon comes in: manufactured urgency, capable of transforming compassion into immediate action. Manufactured urgency. Machiavelli knew that time is the invisible weapon that defines winners and losers. Whoever controls the clock controls the choices of others. Manufactured urgency is the art of creating the feeling that a decision needs to be made now, even when, in reality, the deadline is illusory. Politics guided by reality, not ideals, shows that the real human mind panics at the possibility of losing something. It's the famous fear of missing out. The end justifies the means when time for reflection is shortened and action is forced. Governments did this by announcing imminent threats to accelerate support. Companies use countdowns to push sales. Even in personal relationships, someone says, "Decide now, because I'm not going to wait forever." Better to be feared than loved also applies here. The fear of missing out outweighs the desire to win. Practical examples are everywhere. Think of last chance promotions in e-commerce. Often, the stock isn't actually running low, but the perception of temporary scarcity leads to immediate clicking. On social media, live streams with short deadlines create this same collective anxiety. In negotiations, lawyers and executives announce this offer is only valid until tomorrow, when they know they could extend it indefinitely. The calculated use of force here isn't violence, but time compression. Virtue lies in knowing how to create a sense of urgency without losing credibility. Fortune lies in choosing the right moment to light the fuse. This resource connects to constant adaptability because each audience reacts differently. Some quickly give in to the deadline, others need to feel they are at risk of losing a unique benefit. And it is in this risk that obedience flourishes. In the personal realm, manufactured urgency appears in small interactions. If you don't respond now, I won't have any more time. This opportunity won't come back. Those who master this resource create movement where there was indecision. Urgency paralyzes rational analysis and makes the other person act on instinct. It's a sophisticated form of manipulation because no one likes to feel like they've lost something by hesitating. The appearance of virtue can even mask pressure. Leaders talk about seizing the moment, when in fact they're just shortening their horizons. But this weapon is only complete when connected to the next one, emotional debt. For it's not enough to speed up the decision. The person must feel that by not acting, they will be indebted, not just to time, but to you. Emotional debt. Machiavelli observed that financial debt weakens a person, but emotional debt chains them forever. Emotional debt arises when someone feels the need to reciprocate, even if no one has explicitly demanded it. It is the law of reciprocity applied strategically. Politics guided by reality, not ideals, shows that real human beings cannot bear the feeling of being indebted to another. This constant discomfort keeps them vulnerable. The end justifies the means when a seemingly generous gesture, made with calculation, creates a silent obligation, providing support in a critical moment, offering an unexpected opportunity, saving someone from an embarrassing situation. All these create an invisible bond of dependence. Better to be feared than loved, but being indebted to someone is an even deeper form of fear because it is not easily broken without guilt. Practical examples appear in any setting. A politician discreetly helps an ally in need, and this favor translates into a guaranteed vote in the future. A businessman grants an exceptional discount to a strategic client who then feels compelled to close new deals. Even in personal relationships, when someone receives a significant gesture, such as being heard in a moment of crisis or defended in public, the feeling of needing to return the favor arises. This is the calculated use of the most subtle force there is. The power of emotional bonds. The appearance of virtue masks the real intention, but it doesn't matter, because the effect is inevitable. Virtue lies in offering without seeming to have an ulterior motive. Fortune lies in being present at the precise moment the other person needs it most. Those who create emotional debts gain loyal armies of their own, willing to act on their behalf without needing orders. In the digital world, this is used massively. Influencers offer high-value, free content, creating a sense of indebtedness in their audience. He's already given me so much. The least I can do is buy his course. This mechanism works because it taps into honor and guilt, feelings no one likes to carry. In the personal realm, someone who constantly offers support without asking for anything builds an invisible network of obligations that sooner or later will be exacted, not in money, but in loyalty. This is true power, getting people to act not because you asked, but because they feel compelled to reciprocate. And this is where the ultimate secret weapon comes into play. The elastic promise, which keeps everyone connected to the future, with no set deadline, but always in the expectation that something greater will come. Elastic promise. Machiavelli saw that few weapons are as powerful as a promise that never fully materializes. An elastic promise is one that stretches over time, never immediately fulfilled, but also never discarded. It's the carrot in front of the horse, always close, but never reached. Politics guided by reality, not ideals, shows that people live not only by what they achieve, but also by the expectation of what is yet to come. The end justifies the means when someone is held captive by hope, not achievement. Rulers use this when promising reforms that are on the way without ever setting a date. Spiritual leaders speak of future rewards. Companies create loyalty programs that always promise a bigger prize in the next round. Better to be feared than loved. But being awaited can be even more effective because waiting turns time into shackles. A concrete example: a boss promises a promotion but always adds a new condition. We need to wait until next quarter. You just need to prove your worth once more. The employee works harder, believing the moment is near, but the deadline never arrives. It's the calculated use of force applied to time, not by the pressure of urgency, but by the seduction of expectation. The appearance of virtue disguises manipulation because the promise sounds like recognition. Virtue here is keeping the promise close enough to be credible, but distant enough to not be held accountable. Fortune is having external circumstances as the perfect justification for postponing. This also happens in personal relationships. One day we'll travel together. Soon we'll make it official. The elastic promise keeps the bond alive even without actual delivery. It's constant adaptability in its purest form because the promise adapts to the circumstances. In the digital world, the elastic promise is used in product launches that never have a clear end date, only endless teasers. Streaming platforms announce series that will have new seasons soon, creating eternal anticipation. Even in virtual relationships, someone says one day we'll meet, indefinitely prolonging the bond. It's a strategy that keeps people trapped by the future, not the present. And herein lies the Machiavellian secret. When someone expects something from you, they are already under your control. Because their time is tied to your rhythm. The end justifies the means when you realize that hope is an invisible chain stronger than iron. But if all these weapons, from intermittent validation to the elastic promise, seem brutal, remember, the power game is never about morality, but about effectiveness. And that's precisely why we now need an introduction that reveals to the viewer why these weapons are used against them, without them even realizing it. Now that you've seen these weapons in action, tell me, how many times have you fallen for them without realizing it? How many times have you believed it was your choice, when in fact you were just reacting to an invisible strategy? Machiavelli already knew. Those who don't understand the game become pawns on the board. Politics guided by reality, not ideals, shows that being good or fair isn't enough. You have to be smart. Would you rather continue being manipulated or finally learn to manipulate your own life? The end justifies the means when it comes to protecting your emotional freedom. And if you found yourself a hostage to these weapons until now, the good news is that you can use them to your advantage. So answer me, which of these strategies resonated with you the most? Which one did you recognize yourself in? Write in the comments, because when you share, you stop being a silent victim and start becoming a player. And don't forget, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell, because here, each video is another weapon in your defense, and you can't afford to miss the next one.